Hello and welcome to the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid Public Survey Training hosted by the Northwest Michigan Invasive Species Network, or ISN. My name is Katie Grishak, and I'm the ISN coordinator. Audrey Meninga, ISN Invasive Species Specialist, will also be presenting today. We're especially grateful to the Eyes on the Forest program through the Michigan State University Extension for creating the questionnaire that makes today's training possible. A quick overview of what you can expect today. After a quick introduction to the Invasive Species Network, we'll do a review of Hemlock Woolly Adelgid, or HWA. If you'd like a more in-depth information, please check out our previous webinar that's covered this subject in depth. We will have a link to that in the YouTube description box. The real purpose of today is the ins and outs of the survey process, from how to do it in the field to how to tell invasive species managers that you've done it. I'd like to begin by sharing that ISN is a cooperative invasive species management area, or CISMA, and we operate in Benzie, Grand Traverse, Leelanau, and Manistee counties. We're lucky to have over 60 partners in our service area and funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, the Good Neighbor Authority, and the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program that allows much of our work to take place. We couldn't do our work without our awesome partners. Some of ISN's current programs include on-the-ground management of invasive species on public and private lands, providing technical assistance to the public by answering questions and connecting folks with resources, and educating stakeholders through print, electronic, and face-to-face outreach. We also have a fantastic program called Go Beyond Beauty that's focused on removing high-priority invasive species from sales and from gardens. We work with garden professionals and the public to raise the bar for gardens, and we're going statewide with this program soon, so stay tuned. If you like the work that ISN does but aren't in our service area, I'm happy to share that there is a CISMA for every part of Michigan. You can find yours at michiganinvasives.org. We're all a little bit different, but we're lucky to work together a lot and share a lot of resources and experience. Before we get going on HWA, I want to share a quick reminder that we at ISN work to prevent and manage invasive species, not because they're lurking in the woods to eat us, but because habitat matters. It's important for people who like hiking and mountain biking and bird watching and photography and just find nature to really help their mental health and physical health and more. Habitat is also crucial for the wildlife that lives in it. There are so many close connections between the location, plants, and animals that mean the difference between life and death for our butterflies and birds and game species. And finally, habitat matters for Northwest Michigan's economy, from tourism of our natural areas to agriculture, timber, and fishing industries. Habitat is a big part of what makes up North home. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Audrey to walk us through Hemlock's HWA and how to survey.
All right, everyone, we're going to start with a Hemlock ID refresher. So hemlocks are an evergreen tree. They're old-growth trees about 500 to 800 years old, and they can get pretty tall, as you can see in this picture here. They have short, flat needles that have this white stripe on the underside of them, and then they have these tiny cones that stick to the twigs. They also have these needles along the top of the branch, and they're upside down, so you could kind of see those white stripes right in the middle there. Their bark is red to gray, although that can vary a lot depending on where the hemlock is growing. A balsam fir is the most common lookalike with a hemlock. It has a similar branch growth, but the needles on a balsam fir are going to be longer and darker, and it's not going to have these needles right down the top. So identifying HWA, it is a tiny insect native to Japan. It attaches to the base of the needle where it's going to insert that sucker mouthpiece and feed off the nutrients from the tree. And what happens is hemlocks do a thing called self-pruning, where when the hemlock senses something wrong with a branch, it cuts off the nutrient supply to that branch. And because HWA is such a prolific spreader, eventually the hemlock will cut off nutrients to all of its branches and basically kill itself. You can see in this bottom picture these white little woolly sacs along each of at the base of each of these needles, and that is the ovisac. That is what the HWA will form around itself to protect itself during the winter time, which makes it visible and makes surveying much easier. It's also the lowest chance of transfer during the winter time when they're in that ovisac. It's hard to spread that ovisac. Often if it falls off if it's scraped off the tree, it will just die. And that's the other part of why we survey during the winter time. Some preventative measures for stopping the spread of HWA. Trim up any low-hanging trees. So if you have a hemlock over your driveway, trim up that hemlock branch that maybe your car might brush up against, and then be careful when you're disposing of your hemlock waste. Be careful about moving between locations with trailers and vehicles. You can spread it by car. So if you're down in a campground that you know has HWA, just be careful about brushing it up against another hemlock tree. If you're buying from a nursery, check the hemlock stock before you buy the tree. And don't break the quarantine. A lot of these counties that have HWA have a quarantine on moving hemlocks in and out of the county. So definitely if you're going to be buying from outside your county, double check to make sure that you can. Animals can be spreaders, unfortunately. So birds are of particular concern, which is a little bit of a problem because we are in a flyway zone, so a lot of birds migrate through here. Keep an eye on any hemlock trees you have next to bird feeders, and maybe keep an eye on any hemlock trees along deer trails, which hemlocks and deer go hand in hand, and just survey your trees. So if you're looking to target specific trees, you're going to want to look for trees that look unhealthy. Specifically for HWA, you're looking at random branches that are dead or dying. You can see right here, there's a lot of unhealthy branches here, but this is perfectly fine. You can see over here, you've got branches in the middle that are dead, but branches all around are still alive. So you can also look for a limey green color to the needles. I wasn't able to get a great picture of it, but it will kind of stand out. You'll look at it and go, that doesn't look quite right. Any excessive needle drop, graying of the needles, which you can see again on this picture here, and a general decline in health of the tree. So if you, again, notice random branches dying or parts of the branch dying, definitely target that. Depending on how the HWA was spread, there will be different ways that the tree will die. So if it's a bird that spread it, it might start dying from the top down. If it was spread by a car or a person, it might start dying from the bottom up. Looking at some hazards when conducting a survey, to separate it out into a couple different seasons. In the wintertime, when we're usually conducting surveys, which is December through April, you're going to want to watch out for trees and fallen debris under the snow, especially when you get deep snow. You can't even tell that there's anything under there until you've stepped on it. Oftentimes, too, hills will look like more snow. Icy patches can sometimes be deceptive. You don't notice that it's changed from snow to ice. Hidden riverbanks, a lot of times the snow will build up along the riverbank and will start to look like the actual bank, but when you step on it, you'll quickly discover that it is not solid ground. And then you're going to want to watch the cold. A lot of times you won't realize how cold you are until you get back inside. And obviously it can be a wet time of year sometimes too, and that will contribute to the cold. Now, when you're looking at April through November, this is when HWA could be spread. It's in its active crawler stage. So you're going to want to do a decontamination. If you're in an area that is already known to have HWA, or if you see something suspicious, you're going to want to take all of your clothes and throw them in the dryer. If you are out in an area where there's been no HWA discovered before and you see something suspicious, you're going to want to take that picture, flag the tree, and then leave the area. You don't want to go around and maybe accidentally spread anything to another tree. Obviously, other mundane things to look out for include poison ivy and other biological threats like mosquitoes and ticks. And then during the whole year, you're going to want to watch out for hanging branches or widowmakers, which are branches that have already snapped off and are just waiting for the right wind to knock them loose from the tree. Hung up snags, especially ash trees and beech trees that are already fallen. And then again, beech trees are notorious for snapping, and on windy days, they're very good at snapping. So you're going to want to keep an eye out when you're out surveying on windy days. And then you're obviously going to want to watch out for steep slopes and uneven ground, sometimes go hand in hand together. Now for the moment that you're all waiting for, how to conduct the survey. So how we do our surveys is checking 30 trees per acre. That means that if there's 1 tree in the acre, then we check the 1 tree. If there's 45 trees in the acre, then we check 30 trees. Out east, they found that you get diminishing returns after about 30 trees per acre, where you're not getting a higher chance of finding HWA. And then when we look at a tree, we're trying to look at 4 branches on each tree. But we have been starting to look at more kind of looking at whatever you can get to, specifically because a lot of hemlocks don't grow with 1 branch in each direction on the tree. Especially in an old growth hemlock stand, you're going to find that a lot of hemlocks have dropped their lower branches. And in that case, what you want to do is you want to look for branches on the ground. There's a lot of animals that will help you out with that, including porcupines, who will clip from the very tops of the trees. Deer will sometimes pull down branches, and squirrels will as well. And that may, lead to something where if you find something suspicious, you don't know exactly what tree it came from, but you do know then that there's something suspicious in the area. And that's better than not knowing anything at all. Because you are not grant funded people, you can conduct the survey however you'd like. So if you want to look at those 45 trees per acre, you can do that. And when we're out doing a survey, we call it a strategic wander. So we're following hemlocks. If you walk into a field and you're like, wow, there's no hemlocks growing there, there's no point in walking through that field. You might as well stick to the ridge lines where hemlocks like to grow, or along rivers, in riparian areas. And if you see a tree that looks maybe not super healthy, I would look at that tree specifically, make sure that that's 1 tree that you survey. Now, if you see something suspicious, take a photo of it. You can either send that directly to us, or as Katie will describe later, you can submit that photo in the reporting for the Eyes on the Forest, and that photo will come to us. All of that data bounces back to us. And you're going to want to mark that tree. So we recommend flagging tape in a bright color, and that way we can find it again easily if we do think we need to go back out there. We've got a short little video about conducting the survey out in the field. So you're going to be approaching the tree, going to the end of a branch, and you're going to flip that branch so you can see the underside, so that you can see the HWA. You can't see it from the top of the branch unless it's a prolific or an old infestation oftentimes. But once you flip the branch, you can really see it on the underside. As shown here, this was taken downstate. And so that concludes it for my part of this. Again, if you have questions, we'll be doing questions at the end. And I'm now going to turn it over to Katie to talk about the Eyes on the Forest platform.
Now that we're all experts in hemlocks and HWA, it's time to learn how to do the reporting. First, we'll chat about the Eyes on the Forest form. It can be accessed with this link, which will also be in the description box on YouTube. It's a pretty simple form, and we'll go through it step by step, but there are a few requirements we can go over first. You can have an Apple or an Android phone, but you will need to give your contact information so that if we have any questions about your record, we can contact you. Your phone will automatically know where you are through the magic of computers, but it's really great to have any additional landowner information you can share with us, like their contact information. It can make things way easier if we do have a suspicious branch. This isn't required, it's just very helpful. If you do suspect you found HWA, we need to have a photo so we can either help rule out a lookalike or decide to come out and get a sample. And similarly, if you suspect you found HWA, please, please, please mark the tree and even the actual branch in question. And to do that physically, tie on some flagging tape, of course, or even a broken shoelace. This can be really, really crucial for finding a single tree in the forest later on. Please do not take samples. We need a special permit to move HWA or suspected HWA around, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help on that. And then the great thing is that this survey form automatically notifies invasive species managers if there's a suspicious branch, and that way we can mobilize. So this is really the one-stop shop for reporting. Here you can see the Eyes on the Forest HWA public survey form in all its glory. Right up top, there's a quick written reminder of what you're looking for and not to take a sample, but to please take a photo if you see something suspicious. If you scoot down, at the bottom of the page, you'll see you can add your name and email to get updates on Eyes on the Forest program. This form is just one small part of their efforts. In the middle, you'll see there's a space to enter your name. This central area is the place to scroll up and down to submit your survey. It can be a little funky to make sure you're scrolling in the right place on the screen, so make sure you stick to the middle. First, I'll put in my email so folks can follow up with me. You can also put in your phone number. My phone automatically knows the current date and time. But if I'm entering something I did yesterday, you can see that I can edit this information as well. If I'm hiking on a named property, especially if I don't know the address, I can enter that information here. Let's say I went for a hike at Brown Bridge Quiet Area. This information is optional, so if it doesn't fit, don't feel like you have to. Next, I'm asked about the size of the property. I happen to know that Brown Bridge is 1,310 acres, but if you're not sure of the acreage, you can estimate or leave it blank. Next, I'm asked about the type of the property, with public and private being the options in the drop-down section. Brown Bridge is public, but if I was hiking on family property instead, I could certainly select private. Next up is the number of acres surveyed. If I'm out doing a specific survey on my family's property, I might have a pretty good idea of what kind of acreage I'd covered. If I checked a few hemlocks on a hike, I might not know. Use your best judgment. For this example, I'll say I was helping out the city of Traverse City and Grand Traverse Conservation District, and then I purposefully surveyed about 10 acres. Now it's asking me how dense the hemlocks were growing, with a few options to choose from. If you went out to an area where you thought there would be hemlocks, but there weren't, you can select none. That data is useful for us in case we want to survey in the future. If there's just a few here and there, it would be sparse. If there are more hemlocks or there are patches of hemlocks, you might select scattered. And dense means that it's just about only hemlock trees in the area. I'll say the area I looked at was scattered. There were patches that had nice hemlock stands, but it wasn't the whole area. Now the million-dollar question, did you find anything suspicious? If you didn't find anything suspicious that you think might be HWA, you select no. But if you found some woolly white masses attached to the underside of hemlock needles and want someone to check it out, select yes. I'll say I didn't, and I'll select no. Then you can add any notes about the site that could help future surveys. You can also leave it blank, but I'll mention that I was on a very steep slope. Next up is property owner information. If you don't know, you can leave this all blank. If you do know, or even know part of it, you can please provide that information. So for example, I know that this is owned by the city of Traverse City, but I don't know their mailing address offhand, and so I'll just scoot on down. However, the last field is county. If you know this, it can be especially helpful with connecting your report with the proper SYSMA. It's not required, just useful. So there you can see I had a little trouble with the scrolling, so make sure you're sticking to the middle. Remember earlier when you were asked if you found anything suspicious? If you answered yes, please, 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 pretty please, add a photo of the suspect branch or branches down here. You can attach more than one photo, which can be especially useful in ruling out lookalikes. You can upload existing photos by selecting this dotted line box, or you can use this form to take a photo through your phone by clicking on the camera. If you haven't already given permission, your device may prompt you to allow the survey to access photos and the camera on your phone. Please select Allow. You can always disable this after submitting if you choose. Finally, regardless of whether you found something suspicious, use the map to share the location you were searching. You can use the little crosshairs right here to have the little magical rectangle just zoom the map right to where you are now. Your device may prompt you to allow the survey to access your location. To use this feature, you have to select allow, but you do not need to enable this. You can click and drag and use the plus and minus buttons to bring you to different parts of the map. And you can also put in an address or even the GPS points to help narrow down to where you're at. Once you've selected your location, you may need to push this back arrow to go back to the area where you can scroll down. And then I did not select a location, but at this point, when you have selected it, it will tell you that it has been successful, and then you will click and select this submit button. Sometimes scrolling past the map can be a little tricky, so just remember the difference between that middle window. Once you've completed the form, again, you can select submit and you're finished. If you don't have your phone with you when you're out in the field, or hopefully someone took a photo for you, but you weren't able to get online, you can actually just follow that link on your home computer. On the same website, it looks the same, it operates the same, it's just wider and you can use a mouse and a keyboard instead of tapping with your fingers. One thing I do want to share is a strategy to consider when you are entering your HWA data is not to do it at the start of your hike. If you don't find anything suspicious, you can fill it out at the end of your hike and drop that location in roughly the middle of where you were hiking or where you were surveying. But if you're out in the field and you do find something that sends up some red flags, you fill out the form right there next to that tree and drop the location right there. If you find multiple locations of suspected HWA during your time, please submit a survey for each time so we have those locations. Unless it's like 3 trees right all next to each other, you could just fill out one, but do mark all those trees. And again, yeah, just physically mark those trees. Finally, don't be afraid to submit those surveys that just say, no, I didn't find anything. Yeah, invasive species managers like me will get another email that helps fill up our inboxes, but that negative data can help us narrow down where to look for HWA in the future. You may have noticed I didn't have to log in when I used that form. The HWA survey isn't an app. However, you can pin the website to your phone's home screen for easy access on both Apple and Android devices. So on Android, you click these 3 dots in the upper right hand of your little screen, and then click Add to Home Screen. On Apple, at the bottom of your screen, there's the share icon in the bar there, and then you add that to your home screen with a really similar dialog. On both platforms, you have a chance to rename the link to something shorter or more useful for you. I chose EOTF HWA because I love acronyms. And then it'll show up on your phone just like an app. It will take you directly to that web page. If you're not able to use the Eyes on the Forest survey, you can also contact your SISMA directly. However, unlike the form, SISMAs will only want to hear about when you find something you're suspicious of. And so whether that's us or one of the other SISMAs, you can find your local SISMA by visiting michiganinvasives.org, or you can contact us and we'll help you find the right folks. It's especially important to take a photo. This is kind of the only way that we can figure out if we need to mobilize or not. We can figure out if we can rule out some of those lookalikes, and maybe you're able to text them or email them. It'll depend on the group. For ISN, we accept both text and email pictures. But because your phone isn't doing all the work for you this time, it's especially important to have clear location information, including the address and walking directions from the parking place to the tree. And again, you should mark that tree and even the branch, but again, don't take a sample. A quick logistical note, where you keep using words like suspect and suspicious, because only the United States Department of Agriculture Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or USDA-APHIS, can confirm HWA in a new county. So in order to move anything that's suspected to be HWA, a person or organization needs a special permit. And I mentioned already that ISN has one. And we will work with you so you don't need permits. Samples that we suspect are submitted first to the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, or MDARD, and then if they think, gosh, that does look suspicious, they'll forward it to USDA-APHIS. If USDA-APHIS confirms HWA, MDARD may extend quarantines or other new regulations on that county, which can result in a lot of other effects. So for this reason, we use really specific language and we don't share results until there are results to share. We're not doing this to be sneaky. We just don't want to start the rumor mill going or play some sort of game of telephone where no one really knows the right answer.
Just to wrap up before we go into questions, this first link here is obviously for the public survey. That is the whole reason we're all here tonight. Other resources that you can check out include the HWA webinar that ISN hosted in January. That's on our YouTube page. You can also find it on our videos on our website at habitatmatters.org. There's also the treatment webinar that the DNR conducted earlier this, I believe was also in January. You can check that out still. You do need to register in order to view it, and that includes a lot more treatment information. You can also go to michigan.gov/invasive for a more technical look at HWA, including what treatments look like. SaveMyHemlocks.org will give you more of a general overview of HWA. And again, our website, habitatmatters.org, that also has a survey request on it for anybody that lives in our service area, Benzie, Grand Traverse, Leelanau, or Manistee County, who live within 5 miles of the shoreline. You can fill out that survey request and I'll get back to you. If you are not in our service area, you can go to michiganinvasives.org to find your local SISMA.
And with that, I think we are ready to move into the question period. So Audrey and I will be available, and we also have Julie Crick, who oversees the Eyes on the Forest program, and Claire Peterson, who helped develop the app. And then not on the slide, but also present is Drew Rayner, who is the HWA coordinator for West Michigan with the DNR. So I'll start my video again so you can see me. Hi. And if you have questions, we would love you to drop them in the chat. You can also unmute yourself, but like maybe raise your hand first and we can call on you so that we don't have a bunch of folks talking over each other. So Audrey, I know I have a question for you. I know you, hey, I know that you mentioned that, you do the 30 trees per acre, and that folks who don't have grants could survey different amounts of trees. Do you have any guidance that you would say, gosh, do every single one, or what do you think?
A lot of times when we get into areas where it's just straight hemlock, usually what ends up happening is we end up walking these like winding circles where you might not look at every branch on one tree, but you're looking at multiple trees in that area. When they're growing that close together too, you're not often going to be able to get 4 branches on a tree, because that's usually an old growth hemlock stand, and usually they've dropped all of their lower branches. So, we usually target, if you see a tree that doesn't look healthy, target trees that are right along the trail, especially if they're drooping over into the trail where they're easy to hit. And just kind of playing it by ear mostly.
And I think you've also taken some binoculars out into the field occasionally, right? To see some of those higher branches.
I haven't, but I know other people have. It can get hard to see. There's a lot of things that'll play tricks on you. For example, yesterday we were out surveying and it was raining, and the raindrops were sticking to the hemlock. And sometimes when you would look up into the tree, it would look like there might be something solid there, but it was just the way the light was hitting the raindrop. Snow will often do the same thing. And so, you know, you can use binoculars. People at the DNR will use binoculars. I've heard Scott and James, both big HWA people for the DNR. I've heard them arguing about which they think is better method. So binoculars do work.
Great. There's a great note in the chat from Nicole about faster entry using an iPad or iPhone. So definitely if you're an iPad or iPhone user and you're like, gosh, that was a lot of fields, definitely check that out. It could make your life a little easier. The next two questions, actually, Drew, if you want to think about unmuting, I think they'd be great questions for you. Although if your mic doesn't work, I can certainly help as well. My understanding is that most of the hemlocks in the east have died from HWA. What are the realistic prospects of preventing loss of most of our hemlocks in Northwest Michigan?
Yeah, so I think one major difference is the stage of infestation that we're in. Out east, it's been something they've been dealing with for a long time, and they've had to learn a lot of lessons on how to control this and the best methods to treat and manage this. We're in really good shape because we're still really early in infestation. It was 2016, 2017 when it was really found here in West Michigan in just a couple sites. We're still limited to 5, kind of now 6 counties here in West Michigan, and it's really hugging to that coastline, and it isn't really widespread. And we also have the advantage of having all the lessons learned from out east. We have all the tools, we know the treatment methods, we know how to manage this effectively and can get out in front of it if and when it arrives at some of these sites. So I think we're in a way different spot just because of the time that we're getting it, and we've learned all the lessons from the people out east already.
Thanks. Looks like you're going to get a lot of questions here. Hopefully we were pretty clear on the survey portion. The next question is about, are there HWA resistant trees? And if yes, how frequent are they found?
I don't know that I can answer that one. I know going to some of the meetings out east, they talk about some bullet trees and some resistant trees. They're not really sure how and why and if they are resistant. I don't know that we're at a point now to fully say that yet, or to know for sure if there are resistant trees or what makes them resistant.
And I think we have a whole webinar on the next question, so I'll definitely encourage people to check out some of those previous webinars. But once you identify an infested tree, what do you do with that tree?
So there's going to be a whole lot going on once you find an infested tree in a new area. Currently, there's a lot of treatments that are happening at the northern leading edge of where HWA is at. There's some grants that some organizations have that can assist with some of these treatments. So depending on where the tree is located, how big the infestation is, a lot of work still has to be done. So there has to be a confirmation that that's what it is. Surveys need to take place. So instead of just the meander surveys like they talked about, detailed survey of the property, going tree to tree, doing a full inventory, collecting lat, long, and DBH and size, and all that information needs to be collected, and a whole buffer area around a positive tree has to be searched out before treatments can happen. So kind of a long process. So definitely the first step is just getting it confirmed, and then working with the local partners and looking at survey options and treatment options from there. Outlier populations or new populations would be a very high priority to get addressed to not spread within a new region or new area.
Yeah, and I'll just say that this program in particular, using community science, is a great way to help us. You know, Audrey's out just about every day looking at trees, and there are other organizations throughout the state, SISMAs especially, who are out there looking at hemlock trees, but particularly because we're grant funded, you know, we're really focused on within 5 miles of the Lake Michigan shoreline, but we have hemlocks in lots of places throughout the state. And we think that the HWA is moving along the coast, but it doesn't hurt to be vigilant. And so the work that the public can do to help us could be really crucial in just, you know, keeping an eye out and make a really big difference. Another question.
Real quick, Katie, I'll also say that our crew it's me and one other person, and we cover 4 counties, so we can't be everywhere. So having extra eyes is great.
Absolutely. More treatment questions for you, Drew. And again, like there have been some really great webinars on this, but treatment methods have been shown to be very effective. Is this true? And if so, which products?
Yeah, so there's 2 products that really work for HWA. So one is dinoteffuron, and the other is imidacloprid. Dinoteffuron is a little more expensive. It's very fast acting, gets control really quickly, but fades out and only lasts for up to 12 months in a tree. Imidacloprid is a little slower acting, can take up to a year to get control in a tree, but can persist in that tree for 5 to 7 years, depending on treatment method. So both are really effective, great tools. There's multiple different methods to treat a tree. So there's injection, so that's putting a small hole in the tree around the base of the tree and putting the chemical directly into the tree. Basal bark treatments is mixing the chemical with water and spraying completely around the tree, around the bark, and then it's pulled in through the bark. And then there's soil drenches. So mixing the chemical, dumping at the base of the tree. For the most part, a lot of the work here is injections and basal barks. And there's a bunch of different brand names of products of these imidacloprid and dinoteffuron. And depending on what method you're going to use, it's going to be a different formulation. But those are the 2 chemical names that are being used. And they are still very effective for treating HWA.
Thank you. Audrey, I think we'll go for you for this one. Our property is nearly contiguous with Sleeping Bear and has relatively few hemlocks. Is it still worthwhile to have our property enrolled in the surveillance program?
So I would say yes. Just because you don't have a lot of hemlock does not mean that you can't get HWA. As we learned from the one tree that we did find infested in Sleeping Bear, the Sleeping Bear HWA crew found that one. And, you know, there's not that whole area is not heavily covered in hemlocks, but it is a popular place for people to go. And that's how it was brought there. So I would definitely say it's always worthwhile to check the hemlocks. It just depends on what spreads it.
And the great thing about, you know, looking for stuff, doing maintenance, not maintenance, what's the word I want? Monitoring, doing monitoring work is that it's pretty cheap and easy, especially if it's something that you can do on your own property and just go out and check on your trees. It's a beautiful walk, get you outside, get you some fresh air, and also can make a really big difference. And so it's always a good idea to be vigilant. Next question, how long may the ovisacs persist on the trees?
I can take this if you want.
Sure.
Good.
Yeah.
I would love for you to take that, Drew.
So right now is the easiest time to see it. So your Adelgids are going to feed all winter and they're going to excrete this mess. Right now is when their ovisacs are the biggest and lightest and easiest to see on the tree. They will persist through summer and into fall. Depending on how large of an infestation you have, you can definitely see them through summer and into fall, but they will be degrading as you go. So they'll become more broken apart. They'll start getting a lot dirtier and a lot harder to identify and a lot harder to find. You can still find them, especially in a pretty dense infestation. As far as your crawler stage, crawlers can be seen with a hand lens. So they're very, very small, but if you know what you're looking for and you have a hand wedge, you may be able to see them. I personally can never see them. I don't know, my eyes just aren't as good as other people's. So depending on how good your eyes are and if you have that hand wedge, you can see crawlers during the crawler stage.
In general, though, if you're looking for not crawlers with a hand lens, I would say just to keep an eye on how the hemlock looks. Again, if the hemlock's dying branch by branch, that's definitely something you want to look out for. Oftentimes we have people who will contact us because they have hemlocks die, and they'll die like in a year or two, and that's usually not HWA. HWA is a slow killer, so you will notice it branch by branch and not just all of a sudden the entire hemlock has lost all of its needles.
Julie, if you have a minute, I would love to hear a little bit more about the Eyes on the Forest program. Anybody who's thinking about monitoring their trees, what are some take homes for them?
Sure. The Eyes on the Forest program was created to make people aware of invasive species that we don't have established yet. One of our target species is Hemlock woolly Adelgid, and now we're just trying to help stop the spread of that one through Michigan. And so really appreciate the efforts of Audrey and Katie to do that, and Drew, and to get the word out today for the new survey tool. The other two target species that we have for the Eyes on the Forest program are the spotted lanternfly and the Asian longhorn beetle. And while we found a dead spotted lanternfly here in Michigan last November in the Detroit area, we haven't seen any signs that it's actually living in Michigan. And so we ask people to go ahead and monitor trees for any signs of unusually quick decline so that we can get a report on those and then go out and check those out. One special note about the Eyes on the Forest program and Missin is that we're asking people to look for Tree of Heaven because spotted lanternfly relies on Tree of Heaven. We'd like to have those trees identified in Missin, and that way we can kind of monitor those trees for any further activity. And so as Katie mentioned, no data is good data, and so Eyes on the Forest is meant to get you out there looking at the health of trees and then reporting on that across the state. So join us if you'd like. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Julie. Claire, would you like to say something since Julie kind of teed it up for you there? Would you like to say something about Missin? And I can drop that link in the chat as well.
Sure. So Missin is the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network, and we work, we cover all of the Midwest, but specifically, our main focus is Michigan. We work with all the SISMAs around the state. You can also report HWA sightings through Missin, and that information will filter down to your local SISMAs.
Yeah, thank you so much, Claire. And then the other fun thing is that the SISMAs put our information in there too. So you can actually check out and see what's in your area. It's a really, really amazing tool. Julie, another question for you. Is Tree of Heaven common in Northwest Michigan? Or, well, I can probably answer that one too, if you'd like.
Yes, please.
All right. Yes and no. Tree of Heaven is one that wasn't too common maybe about 10 years ago. It was planted for ornamentals probably between the turn of the century and the 1950s. And it started to kind of take off, but it wasn't too bad. Leelanau County seems to have more than its fair share of it. And then in the last 3 to 5 years, we've started to see it pop up in a lot of places. It is really good at spreading by its roots as well as by seeds. And so those seeds in particular are spreading pretty far and wide. So we are working as we do our work to map those, but we know we are not everywhere. And so having folks report where they see any invasive species, but especially Tree of Heaven on Missin is especially useful.
Gonna make it an easy night for us if you guys don't have any more questions.
Great. I could just keep thinking of questions.
I'm sure you could.
Well, great. We all have Audrey's and my contact information up there. I didn't get a chance to ask Julie and Claire if they were okay with it, so I didn't put theirs up. But if you have questions for them, I'm sure that we can help route you to them. So please feel free to give us a call or drop us an email, visit our website with any questions. We will get the recording of this up on YouTube pretty shortly, and we'll send that out in an email to everyone who is registered. And of course, that will also be on our webpage as well. And we'll make sure that all of those links aren't just text, but we will send you links as well so that you can access them at home. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And thanks to Audrey and Drew and Julie and Claire for helping me out today. It was a real pleasure. And yeah, have a great evening. And oh, it looks like Claire dropped her contact information into the chat, so you can grab it out of there as well. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Have a great evening.